Okay, hey everyone. We are going to cover some Zenithal priming today. I am going to be using my airbrush, which is why I've got some paper towels down instead of my general, more neutral gray backdrop, because I don't want to make a mess, because goodness knows that is what usually happens. And so here we have Nephenee, who is an elf warrior from the game Judgement, and I have actually already done Zenithal priming on her. And in some cases, you can use it to do some fun light effects, which we are definitely going to do on her because she's got these two, laser swords. My camera's actually a little crooked, so let's... There we go. Now she looks more straight. But to start off today, we're going to be priming a Guild Ball model. So we've got this guy, Veteran Hearn, and we will be showing you how to do Zenithal priming for yourself. And like I said, I'm going to use my airbrush, so you probably hear the compressor go off a few times, and then we'll actually be using the airbrush to do some more light effects on Nephenee once this guy is primed. So what I like to do, and you can do it either with a rattle can or if you have an airbrush, I just start with some black primer. We'll stand him up. I'm using Scale 75 surface primer, black and white, and that is all that you need. So I'm just going to get that going. Add a few drops of water to my airbrush. Make sure I wear gloves so I don't get paint all over my hand, because when I go to the grocery store later, they usually frown on you know, touching fruits and vegetables when you look like a, I don't know, some kind of artist hobo. Hey, Patrick. So yeah, I'm just gonna get, I don't know, maybe 3-4 drops of water in my airbrush. I use an Iwata Eclipse HPCS. It's one of the gravity fed ones, so there isn't like a container at the bottom. So here's my airbrush, and I've got about that much water in there. Really nice. This is the I forget. I think it's the 0.5 millimeter needle in here. Anyway, it's more the workhorse one. It's not necessarily, especially for fine details, though you can get a pretty fine line on it with practice. And then I'm just gonna sort of dump some black primer into the airbrush, and then I take a really crap old brush, so like this, and I just mix it together in the cup because, you know, why not? So black primer, a little bit of water, we are talking, yes, sort of. That's what we're gonna do with the Nephenee model, that elf with the lightsabers, after I do the Zenithal priming. But I kind of need to prime this guy, and the weather has not been cooperating for rattle can stuff, so we get to do it with the airbrush. So I pretty much start and just prime the whole thing black. I tend to use, you can probably hear the air coming out, short bursts. It uses less paint, and gets decent coverage pretty quick without overdoing it anywhere. And I'm holding him kind of upside down a little because I want to get, and there's my compressor. I want to get all the, like, the undersides. We want those to stay black. And where there will be some light white primer later on, I want to make sure that all the shadows kind of stay black and have a good solid coverage. No, this guy is a Guild Ball model. This is Veteran Hearn, who is part of the Falconers team now, and or plays for them both, something, I don't know, Guild Ball. So, Silly Brian, I use an Iwata Eclipse, particularly for priming here. This is the HPCS, so it's the gravity-fed one. And it is the, I want to say it's a 0.5 millimeter needle and nozzle loadout. I have the larger one, or maybe this is the 0.35 and 0.5 is the larger. I don't know. There are two needle nozzle loadouts that you can use with this airbrush. So the larger one I like to use particularly if I'm going to be doing big stuff like I've done a Forge World Reaver Titan before, and those things are ginormous, and I was shooting metallic paints through it, so like depending on, you know, how fine the pigment is, you know, not all airbrushes can handle it, so. But yeah, this is my Iwata Eclipse general workhorse airbrush, and I love it. And I have another one. I have their fine detail one. It's like the HPB Plus. But yeah, they do. So thanks for checking my random spouting nonsense. So, you know, as Acrylic Chemist was saying, Chicago weather never cooperates. I've been trying to see if I could get a nice day to prime this guy for a week, and it's like rained or snowed or freezing rained like all week. It's ridiculous. So anyway, like I said, I'm kind of just trying to make sure that I get a little bit of primer in most of these like more shadowed areas. Like if the coverage isn't like super perfect, that's fine. I don't, you know, there's some primer there. I'm gonna add paint over it, as long as it has some tooth, something to stick to. So we've got a good coat of black. I am going to dump out the remaining black primer in my airbrush. I don't usually, I kind of just dump it into one of these little, like, solo, I don't know, like mouthwash cups or whatever, because I made a little too much, and I don't want to send all that through the airbrush if I don't have to. It just is a recipe for clogs. And then I'll clean out my airbrush a little bit here with some cleaner and a paper towel, and then we're going to transition to the white primer. So mostly in between colors or primers or whatever, I put some cleaner on an airbrush or a paper towel and clean out the cup. And then there's always going to be a little left in like the bottom of gross gunky stuff. And I'll put a little airbrush cleaner in and then run it through. I've got a little like airbrush pot. So I do that off screen for a second. Yeah, I find that for a lot of stuff, especially this is, you know, one of the 30mm scale type models. I don't really feel like I need the gray gradient. I think if it were much bigger and I were trying to do like a very much finer tones, I would use a gray because I have a gray primer too. But with this stuff, yeah, I just go straight to white and then it's fine. So I'm just gonna make sure it's mostly clean. If there's a little bit of the black in there when I add the white, it's fine. It'll still end up looking white or a very, very light gray. And then before I put the next color in, I just shoot a little bit of I've got like a little dropper bottle of distilled water just to get some of that cleaner out so it doesn't mess with the paints that go in there. So I'm going to give my white primer a really good shake. White tends to be a little bit chalky. Again, this is the Scale 75 Surface Primer. One of the other really awesome like bottle surface primers is the Stynylrez stuff. I don't use Vallejo primers anymore, particularly on metal models, because it doesn't stick. Like, you brush it and it'll just flake right off. Again, so I start with a little water in the cup. Shake the bejesus out of this white primer. And then go ahead and add just a couple drops. And take my crap brush and give it a stir in the cup. Alright, and then so when I do Zenithal priming, I don't really come anyway, I don't really come at it from like straight above. I generally like to pick an angle. Let's see if I point better with an actual brush than my airbrush. So rather than like straight above, top down, I like to come at it more from like a relevant angle like this. Mission model primers. I've never tried them. Are they more for... I don't think I've ever heard of them even. But I've tried the Stynylrez stuff. And I like it. It's really good. You can't go wrong with those. And I have really liked these, the scale color. They tend to stick pretty well. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the white, and I am gonna make sure that I'm shooting at the like, you know, that angle that I've chosen, where really I mostly want to sort of highlight the face. And again, shooting in short bursts. We can sort of see that we're building up. And I would say I probably have my compressor set just a little low for white primer, which is why we get a little bit of speckling down here, but again, this is not going to be so see-through that it really matters. I know people have told me, like, it's too speckled. But really, it's only the white primer that seems to cause a problem. So I do a little from straight up, just to hit some of, like, the edges of the details and stuff, and particularly down here on the back of his robe. It's just a little boring otherwise. But again, mostly concentrate on getting his face and the bird. And then, so the reason why I really like Zenithal priming is that when I go to put the paint on this guy, you know, Thursday, tomorrow, whatever, once the primer is fully cured, no matter what I do, like, the base that the paint goes on is really important with how vibrant the colors are going to show up. So things are always going to show up more vibrantly over white than they do over black. Like, the black is going to mute them just a little. And by doing the priming this way, the focus will, almost without trying, end up on his face and shoulders, which is the most interesting part of the model anyway. And particularly for, you know, any kind of gaming pieces on the table that you're kind of just going to glance at quickly anyway, you want to have the focus be there on the face, no matter what. So I'm probably gonna, like, again, it's not really, this guy's really flat. He's a flat model, so I'm just kind of gonna give a little extra here, pick out some of these details in the highlights in the robes. You can sort of see with other models too, like, how much it helps define where the lights and shadows are. One of the other small benefits of Zenithal priming, at least for me, is I almost always miss a mold line. Zenithal priming will pick out any mold lines you've missed every single time. So there it is. And we'll set him aside, and like I said, I think I'll come back to him on Thursday. But then, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and clean out the airbrush again. particularly because next we're gonna start playing with some colors on this really cool, like, lightsaber elf chick. Anyway, catching up on chat. That is SoCal, okay? If I see him at a con or somewhere, I might go ahead and try and pick him up. Goodness knows, like, scale 75 stuff, sometimes, like, I've had to order the primer from Spain, and I really like it, but it takes a while. And last time they were completely out of the gray, so alright. And I'm kind of just gonna I end up with all these little scraps of paper towels when I airbrush. It ends up looking like a mess. So go ahead and clean out the airbrush cup again. And usually, particularly when I'm priming, more so than when I'm using paint, I will use a mask, but you would never be able to hear a word I was saying. I kind of sound like Darth Vader, which is oddly appropriate because this is lightsaber elf chick, who I'm totally gonna make look like a Sith. Some kind of Sith apprentice or something. Alright. One of the other useful little tools that I have to help clean out my airbrush or, you know, fix little blockages are those little dental picks. So for this I've got like just a little bit of like that white primer on the tip, so I'll just sort of use the little bristled dental pick on the you know, over the tip of the needle to get things clean. So I took the little cover off and I'm just going to clean that off. The primer especially seems to like to build up a bit. I'm just going to run the cleaner through probably a few times because the white primer is a little thick. And I kind of want to make sure that what I'm seeing in the cup is clear when I add cleaner or water. Yeah, and especially when I'm priming something, at the end I will break the airbrush down and like actually clean out the inside. I know a lot of people are like, you don't have to break down your airbrush all the time. I'm like, well, mostly what I use it for is primer, and that'll really gum up the works. funny enough, one of the things I have found most useful are like these, just your standard ass pipe cleaners. Alright, so moving on with Nephenee. Here. Lovely elf lighting. I'm gonna go ahead and open up my regular white palette, or wet palette, because I will probably want to be mixing some colors for her on the palette and then transferring them to the airbrush. So first what we're gonna do, we are going to get her darker colors started. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and use a mixture of black and this dark teal color that I love. It's called P3 Coal Black. And I kind of want her armor to end up looking a little bit like dark carbon fiber. So I'm going to be doing a lot of brushwork afterwards. But this is kind of going to help me map out the different tones. And particularly, you know, the light effect from her sabers. For me, I mostly have just black, white, and gray, so I sort of go with what I have. You know, if I wanted to do something really fast, I probably would look for some other color primers, but it's more of a matter of I don't have any other ones, so I think especially if I were doing like a very yellow model, like everywhere, I would look for like a warm brown primer. But I don't really paint a lot of yellow. Alright. So go ahead and get some water in my airbrush. And then use my crap brush to pick up the paint that I just mixed from my palette. And sort of just mix it in. And I just sort of keep adding paint until it's, I don't know, mostly opaque-ish. Like up on the side of the, you know, it's kind of tough to get the light in there just right, but so sort of up on the side of the cup, and it gets mostly opaque. It's still, you know, pretty thin, but like, I don't want to waste a whole lot of time with trying to get coverage. Yeah, that, this Citadel brush might be one of my first first brushes, and it was a piece of garbage, to be perfectly frank. But, you know, hey, for mixing. Anyway, so, where we want to do this dark on her is kind of under the face. Because back here there's going to be more light. And then over on the side of her body over here. So we're going to start with that because her jetpack is also going to have some light. So again, it's kind of short bursts. It's a little wet, so I'm usually kind of just using the airbrush to help dry the paint a bit. And then we sort of want to get across in her, make sure I'm under the camera. I sort of want to get kind of under her face a little, paint dry. And then the sort of underside of her leg here. And down at the bottom of her foot. So at this point, we've mostly got a little bit of the dark. I'm gonna actually add, since I know I'm gonna make these lightsabers kind of like a red-ish, magenta-y color. I'm actually gonna add a little bit of, dark green. Just so that there's a little hint of, no, that's not the dark color. A little hint of that sort of, you know, contrasting color. So it's not really gonna be super green because I still have a lot of that blue black in there. Just, you know, a tiny little hint. Because nothing helps red pop out like a little bit of green. So I'm just adding some Gnarls green into my cup with what was left of that blue-black color. Alright. And we're gonna try to sort of get that again in these shadows just a little bit. And it's pretty subtle. Like, looking at this, you'd almost be like, that's black, but there's a lot of green. Alright, and the other thing I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to get a little bit more like right here on the top of, see, now you can tell how much green is there. So this area is going to have more of like a little bit of whatever the ambient light is rather than strictly the light from her sabers. I'm just going to put a little under her, the back of her jetpack. I'm going to go ahead and swap out the colors. And we're going to go for our kind of red magenta next. And then my heat's going to kick on. Thankfully the paint isn't usually as like thick or hard to clean out as the primer is, so the color swaps don't take quite too long. So for this, I am pretty much going to mix a red and magenta to make something in between the two. I want things to be a little on the pink side, but like I don't want it to go super pink. And then having these colors down sort of helps set the mood, really. And then I will, like, after this is done, I'll go back to my paintbrush and start to work more, like, with the skin tones and glazing, but kind of keeping some of this, you know, pre-color work. Alright, so we're gonna get some water in the airbrush. Pick up my old school mixing brush and just load the paint in the cup. Again, I'm putting enough paint in here that it is pretty decently opaque. I know a lot of people are like, well, it's the consistency of skim milk, and I'm like, I don't, that has no meaning to me. Like, it's mostly opaque. Like, that's what I got for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pretty much just, getting the red color all over both the sabers. And then we're going to use this sort of, as I wander off the camera there, use the directionality of the sabers to sort of light up some of the other stuff. This back here is going to have a lot of I'm going to try just to hit, I know this is kind of a weird angle, side of her face a little bit more. And then down here on the top of her hip. Alright. So we're getting some, I know the white background is actually terrible, but some of the reds. I am going to put some, just try and get some on the, down here where her jetpack is. Just get some of the red in there for the fire color. Her down, and then go ahead and change out the color a little, and I'm gonna go with the pure magenta. Mixed with just a little bit of this Cardinal Pink color. Just to sort of make a brighter highlight here. I do want this to be, you know, pretty bright. And this is more for, like, the lightsabers. Let me move the paints out of the way. There we go. Start to brighten those up. So, get everything under the camera here. It's a little difficult with I want to hold her. It's added a little bit of brightness there. Eventually I will probably come back with some red ink after, just to bring that sort of vibrant red color back. But I want to make sure that I get enough of the light where I need it and want it. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more of that Cardinal Pink just to the mix I have in the cup. Just to brighten it up a little bit more. And again, it's going to look pink. Got a little thicker, and add another drop of water. But then when I go to start working on top of this, with, you know, just the brush, it's definitely going to look, you know, much more like a colored light source. Start with I want to make sure to get both of the lightsabers to be pretty much the brightest thing. I will go back with a brush and probably try to make these white and then blend out some of the colors a little bit more, and then add the ink over top. Again, just because you want the light source to kind of be the brightest thing on the model. Alright. And then what I'm going to do is actually just add, clean out the cup, add a little bit of orange, and then do a little bit of orange like right near the base of the jetpack. And then we will be done with airbrushing and doing like sort of base color temperature stuff. And then as I move along and start like painting with a brush on her, I'm kind of going to have this sort of map of where these colors and highlights are that I placed with an airbrush, which is fantastic. It's kind of a little bit like cheating, and you know, it sort of helps you not get confused about where the light is going to be, particularly with this, you know, OSL stuff. Alright, so I've got some water in my brush. I'm going to grab my Infernal Orange. It's like a super orange. And that'll be a good enough, like, temperature base for the jetpack. I am going to try really hard not to get too much of it on the lightsaber. These short, very short bursts here. pretty, and I'm pretty colorblind. Yeah, you have to bear with me a little. This is the first time I've airbrushed on camera, and I'm like, alright. I think that's pretty good. So we've got the light source from the jetpack. We have light sources from the sabers on her legs and upper shoulders and like the top of her jetpack. I did bring it down just a little bit towards the front because that's more interesting. So, you know, there's a little bit of cheating going on here. But, you know, not a ton. And then we're going to go ahead and clean out my airbrush a little and get to work on painting with the brush so you can sort of see how this all turns out. And I'm not going to do like a super huge clean out of my airbrush now. I just don't want the paint to dry in there and get gunky while I keep going on stream here. Almost there. And then one last clean out with some distilled water. And we are good to go. And then I'm going to quick change out the get the paper towel out of here, so if I bump the camera a little, and then we can actually see what we're doing again. I like to use the gray backdrop because it's kind of neutral. The web cameras, their exposure, like, unless I want to go mess with it every single time, like, it looks, the black of my mat looks too bright, the white of the paper towel makes the model look too dark. Just kind of rules of photography. So, gray is where it's at. So, camera's gonna wiggle for just a second. right. Alright, so now that our exposure is a little better, we've got the lights, like that pink red from the sabers, into the orange of the jetpack, and sort of the green black of her armor everywhere else. So really, like, when you see this model flat on the table, like, you know, we want this part of her face to stand out the most, so I'll probably pop that out, even though, like, more of the lights back here just makes it a little more interesting. Like, you don't always have to follow the rules. There's kind of a rule of cool that makes everything work, but otherwise I would say we've got a pretty decent, like, map of how we're gonna start with her. I always like to start with the face, and we're gonna go ahead and mix up some skin tones, but we're also going to be remembering kind of starting with some glazes more than anything, and then working some of the colors that we used with the airbrush in to keep that sort of light effect, like, regardless of what we're doing. So I am going to start with something of a pale flesh color. But I'm also kind of going to make sure, like, on my palette, I still have the paint that I used for both that red pink tone and the blue green tone, and we are really going to make sure that those colors play up in the skin tones. Let's see, there's some thunder. We're eating a thunderstorm. Hopefully that doesn't last too long, or my poor doggie's gonna get real nervous. And then, just so I can work back and forth a little bit quicker, I'm going to load up my palette with some of these other colors, like the magenta and pink. And then they can sort of get worked into the flesh tones as I go along. And a little bit of that blue-green too. sort of take my base skin tone and thin it down a little. And we're sort of going to glaze the base coat of her face on, so that I'm not, actually, take off the glove now. And then a lot of this, like, dark blue-green stays, and a lot of the pink stays. And then as we get here, we'll sort of do like scalp fuzz, where she's got her partially shaved head, and make sure I sort of get them. Back of this ear. That was a nice big thunder. Again, I'm using more glazes here, so that I don't lose too much in the way of that airbrush work that we did. Starting to get a little more of a skin tone on there. And it's a pretty desaturated sort of base skin tone. Because I do definitely want the focus to end up being on these highlight colors. kind of, you know, still got definitely a lot of that pink undertone, and then the blue-green over on this side of her face. And I have done nothing other than glaze a base coat on. Pretty cool, right? Alright. So I am going to add just a little extra. We're going to add some more, a little more depth, a little more opacity to some of the face. We're gonna start with that blue-green color and work in the shadows just a little bit more. So this was just mixed in with the skin base tone. I kind of want to keep it, you know, on the side of her face that is away from her lightsaber. You know, under her jaw. Kind of in the corners of her eyes. A little bit here to accentuate her cheek. And the back of her, like the underside of her head. And her ear. And then I'm actually going to add a little more. We're going to do some, like, these really deeper, you know, like, way under here. We're going to use our... Wow. Use our shadows to make sure we're telling our story, getting some good visual contrast into. Like, skin colors don't have to come, you know, straight out of the bottle. Like, you know, this pink and green makes for something really interesting. So, like, it's gonna be really dark over here, and then we're gonna play up some of the pink over in the back. Get a little bit more. Okay. One of the other things I'm going to do is get out a little bit of like a warmer white just to sort of make sure I'm not killing my highlights too much. They're already pretty nice just with what's there. And I do want to accentuate her face a little. So I'm going to add a little bit of that sort of magenta red color in with my base skin color, plus a little white for a bit more of a highlight. But this sort of then helps keep the that sort of pink light color in her skin too. It just makes it look a little more, you know, opaque and fully finished and yada yada. And she is really very hard to hold, so my apologies if my hands are like all over. Like even with the holder. Because the only thing that attaches this model to the base is this jetpack. We're adding a little bit more pink to the cheek. We're gonna hit nose, upper lip. And the skin tone is in all of this. But again, it's gonna really end up selling the lighting effect. gonna bring a little bit over here just to sort of make sure we can see the eyes a little. So. And then we're just going to add a little more white to this, bump up the highlight a little bit more, and then I think we're going to make sure that the color stays particularly strong on the back of her head here. Bit to his eyebrow again, just to sort of bring it around. And then definitely want to top of her head up here. Alright. So apart from her eyes, which I'm just gonna skip for now and do later when I'm not necessarily on the camera because they're impossible to see anyway. I mean, we've got a pretty good start on, you know, a pale elf skin tone, but, you know, it's got a lot of that light color in there for the sabers, and then like that dark green, blue-green shadow. So, and it's really, you know, telling her story, like her situation of like being a badass with these two lightsaber weapons. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of that super vibrant, like, pinky red, as a glaze to the very closest part to the saber, like the back of her head, like right here, just to sort of make sure that that color stays super intense right there. We're gonna do the same a little bit from the top of her cheek, like right here. And a little bit on the side of her eyebrow. So. Okay. Welcome to springtime in Chicago. Alright, so we've got even just a little additional color there. And then I kind of have to sort of think a little bit here about where I'm gonna go, but actually with the thunderstorm, what I am gonna do is go ahead and cut things off kind of earlier than I normally do, because unfortunately my poor dog is terrified of big storms like this, so I'm gonna make sure that she's, you know, feeling safe and loved. And this is mostly what I wanted to cover today anyway, was, you know, getting these light sources in with the airbrush, getting these different colors going and how to, like, how Zenithal priming can help facilitate that and that focus on a model. So who knows, maybe we'll get some replay views on Twitch and YouTube because it's not quite so long. But yeah, so we've got real dramatic lighting on this model, and I think she is just going to be so much fun. Also, that airbrush helps speed up this light, light mapping, like, super fast. I think we did that face in, I don't know, half an hour or so, once everything got on the palette. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and keep an eye on my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media for how she turns out. I should be streaming again on Thursday afternoon, so if you want to check it out, I hope to see you then too. Alright, take care everyone. Catch you next time.